World of Warcraft versus Final Fantasy XIV in 2026. That's a title I've never thought I'd see, but to be honest, I'm not that surprised because the MMO community are grasping at straws. That being said, in my opinion, if we're comparing FF14 to retail WoW, then Final Fantasy is the clear-cut winner. That being said, these days you have classic World of Warcraft, which in my opinion is the all-time best MMO out there, so you'd much better off playing that. Especially when I heard a lot of negative stuff on Dawntrail, the new Final Fantasy expansion, but I don't want to talk too much about it because I haven't tried it myself.
At some point, every MMO player runs into the same problem. You don't have time for everything anymore, and suddenly, you have to choose. Should I play Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft in 2026? Maybe you've played both.
Oh man, I really hope this ain't another AI slop. I haven't pre-watched this video, it was just recommended to me. I hate that fact that we have so much slop running around made by AI. I just can't handle it, man. I don't even know what's real anymore, to be honest. It's just that monotone voice that kind of makes me go absolutely nuts.
Sure where to spend your time anymore. Or maybe you're just curious how these two compare today. Because the truth is, these games aren't really competing in the way people think. And choosing between them isn't about...
Of course they're not. If they were competing, then every single other game would have lost to WoW. Nobody could be the WoW killer because nobody tried to be like WoW. And that was actually the saving grace of their games. Because they were so completely different that WoW couldn't touch them. You can say the same thing about Guild Wars 2.
When it's better, it's about...
Yeah, the moment you try to be a WoW killer, you immediately lose. You can't kill WoW. Only Blizzard can.
What kind of player you are. So let's talk about what each of them does well, and where they feel very different.
Pandas.
So let's start with the story. There's this idea that people used to say about World of Warcraft, that the main character wasn't you, it was the world itself.
Yes.
And I think that was absolutely true in earlier versions of WoW. In more recent expansions though, it feels like Blizzard has tried to move towards a more cohesive, character-driven story. But if I'm being honest, I still think this is one of WoW's weaker areas. The way the story is told, pacing, and even the characters at times. It just doesn't always land the way you'd hope, and leaves a lot to be desired. It often feels like the story is built around the gameplay systems rather than the other way around. Like, it's there to support the content instead of being something you experience on its own. That being said though, I do think they're starting to find a bit more footing with Midnight, but it still feels like they have ways to go before it becomes anything special.
No, the story is just a vehicle to convince players that they're playing an MMO when in reality they're playing a simulation. All Blizzard wants is your money. The story is just there so Blizzard can tell you, hey, you want to experience the new epic story, huh? The world is about to end for the millionth time? Of course, you're gonna be the one who saves it. So now, run Mythic Dungeon, you little loser. Enjoy! That's the experience.
Final Fantasy XIV though feels like almost the opposite. I genuinely think that 14 has one of the best video game stories ever told. And I don't say that lightly. Last year, we had big narrative-driven games that people loved. And even though I enjoyed those, 14 still stands above them for me personally. That's how strong I think the storytelling is in this game.
Again, I can only say I can only vouch for myself until Dawntrail. I haven't played the newer expansion. All the way until Dawntrail, I had a blast. The story was fantastic. I loved everything about it. I think the twist at the end was incredible. I'm not gonna say, give any spoilers in case you haven't played or watched it. You should, 100%, or at the very least, watch the story about this game. It's gonna take you multiple days to do so, but it's so worth it because it's so good. But playing through it is probably the best because you get to see all the dungeons and raid for yourself. And the raids are so lore influence. They have huge impacts in there. They're like really cool cinematic stuff that ties through the lore there. You would definitely want to experience that for yourself. And you know, guys who played FF14, you know which parts I'm talking about. But at the same time, yeah, is the story better than World of Warcraft? If we're talking about retail, obviously, who cares about retail WoW? But if we're talking about classic, no. I think classic WoW is the best, has the best story, but maybe it's me because I have a Western mind. Maybe for Eastern gamers it would be different, but in my opinion, World of Warcraft classic story carries over the spirit from Warcraft, it still slaps. It holds to this day.
With that said though, it is slow. A Realm Reborn especially can feel like a bit of a slog, and at times, it honestly feels a lot like traditional MMO questing, even similar to WoW. But one thing you start to realize as you keep playing this game is that 14 rarely does anything by accident. If something feels slow, or even a bit boring in the moment, there's a good chance it's building towards something later. The pacing is slow because it's trying to build the world, the characters, and where everything is going. It feels much more like a JRPG or even an anime arc for those who are familiar with that. From A Realm Reborn all the way through Endwalker, that entire arc is for me the best story I've ever experienced in any video game. Now, I will say, the newest expansion, Dawntrail, felt a bit weaker in comparison.
Okay, so he said it as well.
To remember that Endwalker was the conclusion of a long-running story. It's like an Endgame Avengers moment.
And it was kind of what made me so pissed when they refused to change an engine. I think they should have upgraded the engine. They should have capitalized on the fact that, hey, the story is done now, like, we're finished, one arc is over, let's continue and open a new page, right? Let's turn a new leaf. And they didn't do that. And now the engine sucks so much balls because it was literally made by scraps of paper and duct tape. And I understand because Yoshi P came in and saved the game from literally being obliterated. I completely respect him for that. He's a legend. But also, you guys need to understand that some sort of an upgrade needs to happen. You can't have a game in 2026 that is running on PS3. Okay, you just cannot have that. You literally cannot have that. The game looked like garbage. It is completely mind-boggling that it still moves the way that it does. You cannot even move. Like, when you move, you literally do this with delay because the system is so old. It's the same for attacks, the same for everything, animations, like, count all of that. And let me tell you something. At times, the game does look fantastic. They did really min-max every single thing their engine is capable of. 100%. I'm not blaming them for that. But I really think that we were bound for an upgrade. It's kind of what made me end up quitting. It's just so unfortunate. I really wish they would have swapped it out. I really wish. But probably because it's owned by Square Enix, I believe, they won't do anything like that because it's one of those greedy companies that don't really care about the players. All they want is short-term cash flow, and that's it.
And Dawntrail is the start of something new. So it was always going to feel a bit slower by comparison. I'm not really doing winners and losers in this video. If I was, in this particular thing, 14 takes the story category by quite a bit.
Interesting. I mean, look at that, man. Like, just look at it. It's unacceptable in 2026. It is. And I'm not a graphics person, by the way. I have no problem with the actual graphic themselves. If they want to keep them, fine, but at least make the movement better. Like, the movement sucks balls, and attacking feels so sluggish. That's the real issue I have with the game. Everything is so clunky.
Let's talk about the leveling experience and the early game. I'll just say it straight away. For most players, Final Fantasy XIV is going to have a much smoother onboarding experience. But there's a bit of a caveat to that. You see, you can almost think of 14 as a single-player story game first and an MMO second. The main scenario quests, or the MSQ, basically takes you from point A to point B the entire time. It's always very clear what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to go. The game slowly introduces new abilities, new systems, new things to learn. And it does it at a pace where you almost never feel overwhelmed. There's a very clear path forward. And then the MMO is kind of built around that path. You can step off for a bit if you want and do some side content. But the MSQ will always be there to guide you forward. World of Warcraft, on the other hand, is almost the opposite. You're thrown into the world, and from there, it's a bit of a Wild West experience. You can choose which expansion you want to level in, where you want to go, and what you want to do, but the downside is that the leveling is so fast that it's very hard to get any kind of a cohesive experience.
Yes, because the leveling is just there for optics. There is no leveling. Blizzard just wants you to reach the end game. That's why they're selling you at every single possible chance a level boost. There's a reason why the moment you log into WoW, it's like, oh, you want a level boost? Like, why wait? Have fun now. Because right now the game is clearly garbage. So you want to have fun? Just buy the next level boost. Just do that, chief. And also with the expansion, whenever you purchase the expansion, oh, you want the deluxe upgrade? It comes with a level boost. You should do that. It's so cringe, and it's on the nose too. And I think it's one of the reasons why Blizzard won't make the experience better. Also because they're incompetent and lazy, but at the same time, they really want to goad players into just purchasing level boosts.
You're gaining levels quickly, unlocking abilities quickly, getting talent points thrown at you. I think a lot of new players end up not really understanding what's even going on in the first place. You kinda out-level the content you're in, get moved to a new place, and just kinda repeat that process over and over until you eventually reach the current expansion.
And when you reach the current expansion, you don't know anything about the story or your class whatsoever. So you're gonna get bullied by older players that already assume that your balls dropped and you know everything about the game, and you're just gonna be ostracized by them because they're insufferable fools. That's why. And yeah, it's not a fun experience. That's why no new player would ever come to retail World of Warcraft. And it's kind of the reason for why I'm happy Classic is available, because I genuinely believe that if someone want to start playing World of Warcraft, they should do so with Classic.
Once you get there though, things do start to make more sense again. For most players, 14 is going to feel far more intuitive, more guided, and easier to follow. But not everyone wants that. Some players want freedom. They don't want to follow a set path. They don't want to be told where to go next. They just want to explore and do their own thing. And I guess that's where WoW shines. Because in
no, WoW is an illusion. Like, there is no exploration. You do go in a straight line. The fact that you can just skip a few quests because you out-level them doesn't make it good. It's not. You have clearly a path that you need to walk through, and once you hit the expansion, it becomes the most apparent. So maybe WoW is a bigger cage. That's the better analogy. It's still a cage. It's a cage nonetheless.
WoW, you can actually do that. In 14, a lot of things are locked behind the story, and you always have to walk that path. So again, this ends up coming down to what you personally prefer. There are clear strengths to both, and clear trade-offs as well. Let's talk about the endgame. For a lot of players, this is the main part of any modern
WoW
MMO.
takes the crown. No question about it.
Raids, dungeons, PvP, collecting. I can safely say that both of these games are packed with endgame content. But again, they cater to slightly different types of players. Final Fantasy has some of the best designed raids in the genre, and it also has some of the most challenging content out there, especially when you get into things like ultimate raids. But overall, 14 leads a bit more towards a casual and relaxed experience. Doesn't mean it lacks challenge, it absolutely doesn't. Progressing through extreme trials or savage raids can feel incredibly rewarding. But the game—
No, people still need to know what they're doing. Absolutely. You had like Alexander raids and all that stuff. You had, I forgot the names, guys. Sorry if I'm confusing something here. But yeah, you definitely need to know what you're doing. Was it a bit more casual? Sure, 100%. Is that a bad thing? No. It just catered to a different audience, and that's completely fine. I'm glad we have that on the market. I'm glad we have that available. This is great. Personally, I love World of Warcraft raiding because I love like the difficulty, but that's me, right? I'm a Souls-like player, and I love that difficulty. But some other guy wouldn't, and that's completely fine. Sorry, had to go there for a second. I'm back.
Rewarding. But the game doesn't release that kind of high-end content as frequently throughout the year. So what ends up happening in 14 is that you do a bit of everything. You collect glamour, maybe spend some time on player housing, level your crafter and gatherers, then mix in some raiding here and there. It's just a bit more chill, for lack of a better word. Gear exists of course, but it doesn't feel as central to your entire experience. Outside of high-end content, you can get pretty far without constantly chasing any sort of upgrades. So overall, 14 feels more relaxed in how you approach its endgame.
Wait, there's no gatekeeping for the noobs? What? Bro, how can you play a game such as that? Wow, yikes.
WoW, on the other hand,
disgusting.
Once again, almost the opposite. While WoW has made some really good strides recently with more casual systems like delves and housing, at its core, it's still a much more competitive game.
Sweaty.
A lot of the endgame revolves around progression, the next gear upgrade, pushing higher keys, improving your performance. WoW has set the gold standard for raiding for many years now. It also has Mythic Plus, which is essentially infinitely scaling dungeons, and it also has an active PvP community as well. And maybe more importantly, it delivers that content consistently. It's actually kind of impressive how much endgame content Blizzard manages to put out. If what you're looking for...
Yeah, because it's all they focus on. Of course. Of course that's all they deliver, because that's literally the only thing they care about these days. That's why the story is so garbage and the leveling is pretty much non-existent. Of course they have a lot of endgame content. You only play it for the endgame.
4 is raiding, dungeons, PvP. WoW.
It was Blizzard.
To beat.
They were trying to silence me.
Let's
you watch
talk
it
about
live.
the players and the community, because at the end of the day, these are MMOs. You're not just playing a game, you're sharing a world with other people. And
Guys, do we even need to go through this? We already know the answer. Whenever you're gonna compare any MMO community to World of Warcraft, you know that World of Warcraft is never going to take a W. You know that. So why are we even doing this? Is this some sort of a humiliation ritual for us WoW players? Just stop that. Just please. Let's move on. End it quick. A swift and decisive blow.
People in that world matter more than we sometimes think. And yeah, this is one of those areas where the games are very different. Since WoW is a more competitive game at its core, the player behavior often reflects that. Now, I do think there are a lot more friendly and casual players in WoW than people give it credit for, but they can be a bit harder to find, I think. Because most of the time, you're interacting with other players.
Yeah, I mean, the people you find that are like that are in Goldshire, and they may be doing some things you don't want to partake in.
In dungeons, raids, Mythic Plus, and in those environments, people tend to focus on performance, optimization, and getting things done efficiently, not necessarily on making friends.
And in translation, it means if you don't watch 7 different guides for a boss and you make one mistake, you would get roasted alive on Discord. That's basically what he's saying.
Because of that, it can sometimes feel a bit rough. That said, there are definitely welcoming communities in WoW, but you often have to seek them out yourself. Final Fantasy XIV, on the other hand, is almost the complete opposite. Noticing a pattern, by the way?
Yeah.
If you ask a question in a dungeon, there's a very good chance that someone will help you. Conversations will happen more naturally and friendship tends to form more easily. The game just feels more social overall. I'm not entirely sure what causes that difference, but it really does feel like day and night.
It's a matter of the company responsible for creating the game, because Blizzard had cultivated this audience. It's not by mistake, it's not by coincidence, because you saw that whenever Blizzard cared, the community was fantastic, right? With classic World of Warcraft. But nowadays with retail, all they do is cater for competitive players. Obviously, these are the people that you're gonna get inside of your game, because you cater to the 1%ers, you're gonna get 1%ers mentality. All you do is care for min-maxers, of course. You don't try to cater to casual audience. And that's why you get these issues. That's why the people and the crowd who are appealed to World of Warcraft are actually appalling. Because at the end of the day, the game just naturally gravitate towards those people, right? Or maybe just, the game pull makes other people gravitate towards it. More, better analogy. It just, at the end of the day, it's just nature of the beast, man. You're gonna get players who wants to play these type of games. If you're gonna make a competitive MMO, you're gonna get competitive players. You're gonna get the sweats. You're gonna get the people who gets mad if something goes slightly off track. But with FF14, you have way more leniency and way more casual gameplay, so more and more people that are casual are incentivized to play it. So that's why you get nice, mellow, rational people, and in World of Warcraft you get rats.
So if what you're looking for is a world to belong in, people to talk to, and a more social experience, then Final Fantasy XIV is probably going to feel like a much better fit.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about some...
I will say that the lack of pop-up text above your character was super detrimental to FF14 in my opinion. I think this is a basic MMO feature nowadays, which again just goes to show how old the systems and outdated they are.
Something that matters more and more these days. Your time. The average MMO player today is probably somewhere above 25 years old. Not everyone, of course, but on average. Which usually means you got other things competing for your attention. Work, school, bills, maybe even a family. You simply don't have the same amount of time to play as you used to. But you still want that time to feel meaningful. So the question becomes, which of these games actually respects that? World of Warcraft has changed quite a bit over the years. It used to have a reputation for being incredibly demanding, the kind of game where people would pour huge amounts of time into it just to keep up. And while you can still play it in that way, you don't really have to anymore. The game has become much more seasonal. You play a patch, you set your goals, and hopefully reach them.
You play until you reach a certain point where you're really, really powerful, and then Blizzard announces the next patch, and you know everything is going to be irrelevant, so you just stop playing. Beautiful system, truly incredible. You can call it seasonal, I guess it kind of makes sense, but nobody likes that. They should really go back the classic route where if you even got the necklace from Molten Core Ragnaros, right? I forgot the name. It was so good, it carried you all the way until tier 5. It was just that awesome. And I can't even fathom why Blizzard is doing the way that... No, I actually can't fathom. They just want you to keep subbing. Yeah, it's cringe.
And then it's completely fine to step away for a while. A lot of the old systems, daily grinds, borrowed power, those aren't really a core part of the game anymore. But at the same time, WoW is still, at its core, a competitive game. And if you want to engage with that side of it, pushing higher keys, raiding at a high level, or pushing score in PvP, you're probably going to feel that you have to keep up with all that. You can definitely and should play it on your own terms, but it can very easily turn into a bigger time investment if you let it. Final Fantasy once again leans in a different direction. It's much more about the journey than the constant push towards the next upgrade. There are certainly things you can grind out if you want to, but they very rarely feel mandatory. Gear isn't essential to your entire experience, so you're often free to just do what you feel like doing. If you want to raid, you need to learn the fights. That's the main barrier there. Not weeks of preparation or grinding just to get started. So if you're someone who only has a few hours a week to play, 14 will probably feel like it gives you more back for the time you put in. But again, it depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, I still think that people should gear up before raids. It kind of contribute to the whole fact of conquering your, adversities and all that stuff, and it really just plays right into the power fantasy that I enjoy, because I love starting as a nobody who can't even fight a kobold in classic World of Warcraft, and then defeating Ragnaros. Like, that's really, really cool, right? You love that because you get to see how you progress from point A to point B, and it's really just amazing. So I think it is important that you need to gear and have like prebis and all of that stuff. You don't need to put full emphasis on that, but 100%, like, you should have that, in my opinion. I don't think gear should be irrelevant.
You can probably tell these games are very different. On the surface, they might seem similar, but I could easily spend hours talking about how differently they're designed. And personally, I play both, just for very different reasons. If I'm in the mood for something more competitive, that sense of progression, pushing myself a bit, then I'll log into WoW. But if I just want to relax and enjoy the world and take things at a slower pace, then I'll hop into 14. It's almost like comparing two completely different experiences. Not better, not worse, just different. And I think that's why I enjoy both of them. So if you're trying to decide between the two, don't just ask yourself which one is better. Ask yourself, what kind of experience are you looking for right now? I genuinely would love to hear how you approach these games. Do you play one? Do you play both? And what keeps you coming back to these games?
Addiction. But yeah, seems to be the end of the video. Great video. I'm so glad it wasn't AI slop. But yeah, I'm gonna leave a link in the description. You guys should watch it for yourself. Give this man a like. It was actually pretty good video comparing these two games. I'm impressed. And yeah, he was absolutely right. But you know, a better analogy would probably if he added... not analogy, just would be 10 times better if he added Guild Wars 2 into the mix. I think Guild Wars 2 is not operating on the same level as these two games. And that's kind of what makes it unique and so much fun to play. So maybe in his next video, could be a neat idea. But I mean, regardless, I think that if you want a really great story nowadays, you should definitely play FF14. I wish I could go through all of the story again and experience it from scratch. Unfortunately, I already know everything that happened, so it kind of sucks. And you know, the main twist won't surprise me. But at the same time, it was so much fun experiencing all of that. It was truly the golden days of my MMORPG experience when I just traveled between the MMOs and tried everything. It was so fun, man. I miss those days.